Hey everybody, thanks for checking out my video. So in this video, I want to go over my world travels that I did when I was a little bit younger. I'm 38 now, and when I was 25, I sold everything I owned and traveled the world for years, actually, by myself. And yeah, it's been an inspiration to some people when I've told them my stories, some of my stories. So I kind of wanted to lay a bit of it out here in a video and explain some of the way I did it and what my thinking on it was, and hopefully you can inspire some more people about how possible it is to do that kind of thing. Uh, when I did travel, I have a website, dustinbrett.com. I can just show it right here. We'll use my website kind of as we go because I have my posts on there. I have pictures. I have a lot of good information on there about what I did. It used to be a WordPress blog, so I blogged a lot. If you look in the blog posts folder here under travel, I've got quite a few years of travel actually, from 2011 to 2012. And then I didn't really take a break, but I didn't post blog posts for a while, and I was kind of back in my hometown of Canada for a very short time before I kind of went back into it and then did a bit more. So I've kind of laid out, I mean, I did 29 blog posts in that year, and I did another 20 between these 2 years. And they're there to check out. I won't go too deep into them at this point. But I kind of just want to show those there because I did try to write my experiences as I went and just kind of the things I did and that kind of stuff. But yeah, let's just get right into it here. So one of the first posts I had done back in, when was it here? Let me sort these by date because it was pretty old. Yeah, it was called Leaving Saskatoon. This was in February 15th of 2011. And this is kind of when I started deciding. I actually started deciding maybe mid 2010 that I wanted to travel, and I'd asked my friends, hey, do you guys want to come? That kind of thing. And everybody was kind of hesitant about the idea, or they wanted to do something smaller. And it was a smaller trip for a while for me. At first, it was like, how can I do a Europe trip or something like that? Maybe I'd just seen Euro trip. I don't know if that was the case, but I was thinking like, yeah, let's do a Europe trip. Let's see how that goes. But I'm like a big into research kind of thing. So this was months of me looking at every website, seeing what every other person had done, how it's possible, buying different books like Vagabonding by Rolf Potts, How to Travel the World, like these travel guides have different round the world travel things. Um, so I'd done a bit of studying, and I'd written this blog post where I showed this is my backpack that I originally went with. This is like a 38-liter backpack, which is big. But if you see now, I have one in the back here. That's like a 20-liter bag, and that's what I ended up using for the last half of my travels, basically. And I traveled pretty light because 20 liters is pretty small. And I did like a picture of all my gear at the time, which people liked as well. This is like the gear photo. This was basically everything that was in my bag. Um, and the first thing that I did was like I wanted to travel cheap because I wanted to be able to do it for a long time, and I wanted to travel long. Like I quit my job, I didn't have anything to go back to. I'd sold everything, no rent or bills or anything like that. So I thought I'm in no rush. So the first thing here that I mentioned is kind of that I bought a bus ticket from a company called Greyhound that doesn't exist anymore in North America. But I took this bus from Saskatoon all the way to New York, which was an experience. It was like 7 buses, lots of transfers and everything. It was an experience, definitely. But New York was one of the first places I wanted to see. And I'm not a huge fan of flying anyways. I kind of always worries me a little bit. So I was happy to like take some buses, and I'd done it a lot as a kid, taking bus rides to Calgary from Saskatoon, which is like 6 hours. So I thought, oh, it's just like 10 6-hour bus rides. Like, I guess that's not so bad. And it wasn't. I mean, now that I've lived through it, so it wasn't so bad. So I bought that bus ticket. It was like 115 bucks, I think, for how far it was, like 2,000 kilometers. And then I'd also had my plane ticket from New York to London, which those are two really popular airports. So I was able to get it pretty cheap, 265 I think I paid Canadian, which I think was like 200 American or something like that. Actually, when I traveled, they were the Canadian and American dollar were almost on par. So it's actually probably better now or worse. Better for Americans, I guess. Worse for Canadians as far as our dollar. But I looked at it just like today even, and it was still $310 to go from New York to London. So you're basically switching continents. You're going across an ocean. It's quite a distance, anyways. So this was kind of like my initial preparation was doing the planning, thinking about how it could be done, and then getting these first two tickets. So it's like I've got my New York plan and I've got my Europe plan. But after that, I basically had nothing. And I'd kind of talked about it here in another travel blog post here where I talked about my itinerary, where I was like New York, the UK. I was going to go all throughout the UK, and then this area they call the Shenzhen area, which is like many countries in Europe that are just connected where you don't have to like go through border guards and that kind of thing. And then I'd planned like Western and Southern Asia. Southeast Asia, Australia, everywhere else, Japan, that kind of thing. I had some pretty big plans, anyways. But I'm happy to say, like many years later, that I essentially was able to execute on those plans. And if you can see here, I have another file here called my accommodations, where it kind of shows all the people I stayed with along the way. And I kept pretty good track of that, so you can kind of see some of the things I did. So I didn't always stay with people, but something to mention here right at the start is just something called couchsurfing. Is I'm gonna be a bit mean to couchsurfing and say they kind of suck now. Their sites tried to like squeeze every little dollar, so it's not quite the same in that way. But the community is there. This idea of hospitality exchange, where you can just come to someone's house, stay there for free, basically, and you just kind of share your culture, that kind of thing. And when I was in Canada, I actually hosted a few people as well. And you could see here from my Couchsurfing profile, I had 99 references. So I'd met a lot of people. I'd done a lot of places, anyways. And you can check out my profile. I don't use it too much anymore, but at the time it was really helpful. And if you look at the accommodations here, a lot of the places I stayed, if it's like names of people, it was basically Couchsurfing. And I basically only ever had good experiences with Couchsurfing. So for me, I recommend it. But um, my advice for all of this stuff, like I'm a man from Canada, so it's going to be different for women. It's going to be different from people from other countries. That's understandable, but at the same time, I would hope that people could take away from this that it's possible. You know, almost any of this stuff is possible. You just have to want it enough and figure it out for yourself, and you got to be street smart, that kind of stuff. But it's really has to be that way if you want to be able to do this, because this video is definitely not for people that want to travel the world, 5-star accommodations, that kind of thing, because I wasn't doing 5-star most of the time. But you can see here that I was able to stay with a lot of people and do my plan to go to the UK and all that stuff. And I've actually got another, like a travel map here. I'll just drag it onto my website. This is like the travel map of my website, of what I went. I put viewing it on my website, but it's just a picture. There's a few places here that I marked that are actually from, not from previous trips, but just there was one trip I did to China when I was younger, and I was working at a computer store, and my friend who was going to China to get his passport, he invited me. And that was kind of my first ever taste of travel. Besides that, I'd only ever been to Canada. I went to Vegas once with my cousins for New Year's, and that was it. So only once into America, and then this little trip to China that I'd gone on. But as you can see from all these dots here, I ended up doing a lot more in the end. Like I said, I'm in Saskatoon here, and I basically took the bus all the way to, where is New York here? Somewhere around here is about New York. And then, yeah, I flew to the UK. You can see here that I went all around the UK. I took the Channel. And there's another thing to note, too, about my travels is I didn't do a lot of flying. Like, other than that, I mean, obviously you have to fly across the ocean. I mean, I didn't have to. I actually looked into how I could get on like a tanker ship or something like that and go over, but it takes a long time. It takes like months or so. So I decided to fly. And a few times I had to fly, but very few times. Like I took very few flights, and it was a lot of bus travel, and I kind of like the bus travel. You know, it's like a free accommodations essentially. You sleep on the bus, you wake up, you're somewhere else. And that's what I did in the UK. I mean, in the UK, most of these places are only a couple hours away. When you look at somewhere like Canada, where I grew up, going from Saskatchewan to just to visit my friend in Alberta was like 6 hours. You could go from the UK to quite a few different countries in about that same amount of time. But yeah, so when I was in Europe, you can basically visit all the places you've ever heard about during your travels, all the cool pictures you've seen. They're all just right there. They're accessible. They're a bus ride away or a train ride in a lot of cases. They're a lot cheaper, the buses and trains in Europe compared to North America, I found. And as far as my path here, I'll just kind of go over a bit of my path for this chunk of the world here. I can really quickly just go over it anyways. Is like, yeah, so I went across the UK, kind of from the north all the way to the south, hit every country, Wales, Scotland, England, Ireland, Northern Ireland, that kind of thing. And then I took the Channel, which is like an underwater train from the UK to Paris, to France. And then boom, I was in Paris all of a sudden. Hung out there for a little bit, took another bus back to Spain, back up north to Paris, and just, I mean, yeah, like, long story short for this, I basically just bussed everywhere. Like, that would be another thing I would always be thinking about, too, on my next travel, because I didn't always have it planned. But I would look at websites like Hostel Bookers, Hostel World, Couchsurfing, even hotels and stuff, just to see, like, what are the prices, what are the things I can do, what are my options. And this is where being a research person, like, doing research really helped me out. And then once I figure out those options, I would just, like, book the next thing. And that essentially can get you around the world, that concept. You can just do that forever if you wanted to. And I did it for years, and eventually you just get tired of it, kind of, I think. Some people do, some people don't. But yeah, I did that all the way through Europe. In the end, I ended up going to Russia, and then when I was in St. Petersburg, that's when I took my next plane. So basically, from when I landed in London until I left St. Petersburg, I never took a plane. It was just all in buses and trains. And then I flew to Egypt because I thought that was cool. And that was another one where I was like looking in Russia. I was like, where can I go next? And they had it was like a $200 flight. Like if you just keep looking at random flights and random days and you don't care about it being as inconvenient as possible, you can find these options. They're out there. So for a couple $100, I went from Russia, and then all of a sudden I'm looking at the pyramids the next day, basically. And then again, I took a bunch of buses. So I took the buses all the way through Jordan and Israel and that area. Basically just that area. I didn't go to like too much into the Middle East in that way, because then once I was in, I think I was in Israel. I can't remember if it was Israel or Jordan, where I took another flight to India, to Mumbai actually. And again, it was another one. It was like just a couple $100, and then I was in Mumbai, and I ended up staying in India for I think 3 months, about 90 some days, 99 days, I think. And that's again very cheap travel there. So this is where I'll get into budget in a little bit, but you have to kind of balance it out. So you can say, oh, well, my budget is $40 a day. Well, that doesn't mean that when you go to India, you have to spend $40, because it's actually hard to do. Like you can find a place for $5 in a hotel, and you can eat $5 is like all your meals basically. So you spent $10 in India and you go, oh, I got to spend another $30. No, because maybe when you're in Japan, it'll be $70 a day, let's say. So you have to balance it out. And that was kind of something I always kept consideration. I had like an Excel spreadsheet, and I used to keep track of what I had money wise. And it wasn't a lot. I never got any money from my parents or anything like that. It was, I'd sold my car that I'd spent like 6 years paying for, my TV, my couch, my computers, all that stuff, everything I had. And I think in the end that only got me about like $20,000, which is a lot in my opinion. I don't have $20,000 now. But at the time that was a lot, and I decided that, you know what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to travel the world. And and yeah, so then after India, where did I go? So from Delhi, I decided it was time for Southeast Asia. I'd kind of planned that I was eventually going to leave India, so I flew to Thailand, another cheap flight. And then again, I went to Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, all of that area, just like on boats and buses and that kind of stuff, very cheaply. Over to Malaysia. When I was in Malaysia, I did fly a few times because it was so cheap. Malaysia Air was like $30. So I flew to a few places around there. I think it was Singapore, I think I'd flown to. And then from Malaysia, I also flew to Japan. And like I'm saying about it being more expensive, Japan is definitely one of the more expensive places. But still, I was just looking even today, and you could get a hostel in Japan, in Tokyo, for like $25, let's say, which is a lot when I'm telling you India is like $5. But $25 a day for a hotel is still pretty good. And that's essentially the high end. But again, it depends on your comfort zone, where you want to be, that kind of thing. It's not going to be dead center in the city, but at the same time, hey, why don't you walk a little bit? Why don't you take the train? You know, like every little thing is an experience kind of thing. And if you think about it that way, then all of a sudden you realize that the world is your oyster kind of thing, and you can go wherever you want. So then I was in Japan for a while. And then after that, I went to Australia for a while, and I actually lived and worked in Australia, in Perth, for a little bit. And I had some fun there. I kind of thought about making a career there, but it didn't in the end. Then I took I took a plane. I did not take a bus across Australia or anything. Could have though. And when I first went to go travel, that was definitely something I wanted to do. I'd seen people doing these Australia road trips, and it seemed cool. But by the time I got to Australia, I was kind of low on funds anyways. Um, so I didn't do too much there. Like I didn't go buy a car and that kind of thing. But I did fly to Sydney and a few other places in Australia before I ended up flying back home. I think I cut it off the map here, but I went to Hawaii along the way too. It was actually again really cheap. Like from Sydney to Hawaii to Saskatoon was like $500 total, and that was with like a 1 week lay or 2 week layover in Hawaii, I think. So I was like, hey, why not? That sounds insane. Like a great deal. And that was kind of when I ran out of money at the end of 2002. Like all of that was just the first part of my trip before I went back to Saskatoon, and kind of did like a bit of a recuperate thing. But at the same time, I didn't have any property. I didn't have a place to stay. So I'd kind of met my cousins at that time, and we kind of rented a house for a little bit. And honestly, I still felt like I was traveling almost. Like I'd already didn't feel like the same person. That was like 22 months of travel right there that I just explained. So I was already like in a different world in my head. But then I think it was like 8 or 9 months, maybe it was less than a year. after that, where I said, okay, I got to get going again. I got to get out of here. So then in 2013, I basically once again decided, like, instead of going from east to west, west to east, that kind of thing, I went south this time. And I didn't mark it on the map here, which is kind of funny, but I actually lived in San Francisco for a while. That was the first thing. So Saskatoon to San Francisco, another one of these $200 flights. You know, if you book it long enough in advance, you don't care about the time, you don't care about transfers, any of that stuff, you can find cheap things. And then I stayed in San Francisco for a while. I really had a lot of fun there. Like 2 or 3 months, I guess I was there, maybe a little longer than that. Stayed at a few different places, did a bit of couch surfing, that kind of thing, before I decided I wanted to do the south side of my trip, which was going to South America, which I did. So then from San Francisco, I flew to Medellin, Colombia, for like less than $200 again, on some random, I think it was called Spirit Airways. I don't know if they still exist anymore, but I do remember they were called that. And that's when I started that trip. And I actually lived in Medellin for a while too. I lived there for like 3 months. And that's another one of these things about where you don't have too much planned, is that it's kind of, if you come to a place and you're having a good experience, it's like, this doesn't have to be 1 week. This could be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or let's just see how long I can live here. You know, let's see if my life all of a sudden becomes about this. And I did that several different times. And then as you can see here with South America, I kind of again did my bus theory, and just started busting down after I kind of got tired of Medellin. I went through like Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil. Brazil being the last one before I flew back to Cuba, and then eventually flew back to Saskatoon again. And this was like, that's a bit like another year of travel right there. I think that's like literally 365 days, that loop that I did basically from when I left to when I was back. But that time I didn't stay for too long, like 2 weeks in Saskatoon, and I flew back to Santiago, Chile, because when I was in Chile the first time is actually when I met my wife, my to be wife, who I went and married, and within a few months of coming back, we'd been married. We were married basically in, I guess, April of 2015 it was, I suppose, or it was March, sorry, that we got married. But then in April, like days after, it was March 28th. So days after that, in April, or maybe a week or two, we moved to Canada and back to British Columbia. Or well, not back to. I'd never been to British Columbia, but that's where I always wanted to live, and that was my decision to start a new life with my wife, and to stop travel for a bit. And that's kind of the gist of all the places I went, and like a quick little summary of how I went through it, anyways. And so as you can see from that, like, you can go to a lot of places. And if you want to dig into these blog posts here, you can kind of see some of my stories that I saw along the way. And I have in my pictures folder here, if you go to my pictures under travel, first I'll show you the travel gear too. So like, you saw this picture here of my 2011 travel gear, which was pretty good. It got me pretty far. And then in 2012, I kind of slimmed it down a bit. Looks like I was in Thailand here, because I got a bunch of Thailand t-shirts. So this is like about a year into my first trip, where I kind of cut down a bit. And the stuff you see right there, that's all you need to travel the world indefinitely if you want. I mean, you end up doing a bit more laundry, but also cheap shirts are so cheap that I was always like switching to fun different shirts, that kind of thing. And then in 2013, that's not a very blurry picture, unfortunately, that I took that long time ago. But it's basically the same gear as last time, like just a small amount of gear. And this was, remember, I had the 38-liter bag, and then I've switched to this 20-liter bag. That's really all I needed ever, was that 20-liter bag. And I had this one in between, this 21-liter bag. That bag sucked. So that's another thing, is like, if you're not happy with your backpack, just switch it, because you're like lugging it around all the time. And then as you can see from my passport here, I have a picture of my passport, and that's every page of a Canadian passport, and I filled them all, which was another fun thing. Like, I have a new passport now that's got a couple stamps in it, but this has all my different visas from Brazil, from India, from Russia, from Vietnam, Japan, Cambodia. That's another thing you have to, like, as you're doing your research, you have to get visas along the way. Egypt is another one. And again, where being Canadian can be helpful, because it's kind of a powerful passport for getting around, that kind of thing. But it's another thing to keep in mind, that you have to plan that as you go. And that was part of the fun for me. It was always like, okay, I want to go here. What's required? What do I have to do to have the least amount of like trouble, that kind of thing. So I had to figure that out as I go. And as you see here from my travel photos, I've kind of got a ton of travel photos. Even if you right click on my wallpaper area here and go background, you can see kind of a slideshow where I have a bunch of my photos that I added on there, that it kind of slide shows through. But I've got them from all over the place. And I tried to take different pictures of different fun things wherever I was. Sometimes I didn't always take the best pictures, and this was 10 years ago, so I didn't have we didn't have the best camera phones at this point. Now it's great. I wish I could do it again. I would have taken a lot more videos. Unfortunately, I didn't. So it's all kind of up here in my head. But I try to take pictures along the way, and I think the thumbnail for my YouTube video kind of has some of my highlight pictures, as does the slideshow. But this is another thing that's kind of fun to look through, and these are great memories. This was another thing where, as I was going in travel, I always like the seven wonders of the world, or the this wonders of the world. I always wanted to kind of see those and see what's so wonderful about them, that kind of thing. And to take pictures in front of them, I guess, is kind of cool. So that was always another thing I was kind of excited to do, was to just to take pictures in front of different things. Like when I was in Malaysia at the Petronas Towers, and so many stories along the way that you get when you live this way, and you just kind of like go for it. I mean, for example, here I have a video of my brain scan. This is when I used to live in San Francisco, and I would go on Craigslist and do different ads and stuff that they would say, like they need somebody to test earphones, or to one time I had to have spiders and snakes crawl over me while I wore like a heart monitor watch for some commercial. The brain scan was from the University of San Francisco, where they were doing some study, and I was considered like the normal person in the study. So I don't know, like they had to check what a normal person's brain looked like. They didn't tell me if my brain was normal in the end, but I got paid for it a little bit, which was kind of cool. And that was one of the ways that kind of I kept money going as well, because my budget was basically like 15,000 Canadian a year, which is about 11,000 US, about $40 a day. And that was more than enough, I would say. But again, it depends what you want to eat. It depends what kind of experiences you want to have. I wouldn't say that I missed out, but it's not like I went to, when I was in Paris, it's not like I went to the best restaurants, or the let's go to the top recommended this, that kind of thing. I would go to like the secret places, that the locals were going to, which is another experience you get from couch surfing, is you get all these locals telling you, well, here's where I go, or here's how I do it, kind of thing. And that's another thing to think about too, when you think, well, I couldn't travel there because it's so expensive, it's so hard. It's like, well, there's millions of people probably living in that place you want to go, and they're making it happen somehow. So it's possible. It might not be luxurious, it might not be the kind of travel that you're expecting, but if those are the places you want to go and the things you want to see, then that's a way to get there. For example, here's another one where I was in like a Bollywood movie with somewhat a famous actress. I think her name's Conga Ranaut or something. But when I mentioned it to Indian people, they're like, "Oh wow, that one," So I'm not big into Bollywood, so I don't know. But it's another one of those experiences where I was in India, in Mumbai, in like literally the cheapest hostel that you can get as a white person. Because I tried to go to the other hostels that turned out to be for Indians only, and they wouldn't let me go in. So I had to find another one. It was like called the Swiss. It's run by the Swiss Army, actually, I think. Or no, was it the Red Cross or the Swiss Army? I can't remember. But it's in a cheap area of Mumbai, and they just like come by with buses and just pick up a ton of white people and be like, "Hey, you want to be in a movie for 500 rupees?" Which is not a lot. Or I think it was 5,000 rupees, maybe. It was like $10 Canadian basically for the day, for like 13 hours of work. But I mean, that's again where you have to think, like, is it about the money or is it about the experience? So for me, I didn't even care about the money. I cared about, oh, that sounds fun. And now I have this like video, like I could rent the video, and I'm in it. I'm in a movie just because I said yes, and I was in the right place at the right time. Uh, so those are the kind of experiences that you can just like run into, basically. Some of the favorite places I went to, because people always ask me that, is definitely Japan. Where is it here? I must have Japan somewhere in here. There it is, Japan. I don't think I have too many cool pictures, like the Golden Temple, different bowling and stuff. I mean, everything's an experience in Japan. It's so crazy. Everything's just a little bit different. So clean, so friendly. You could just like pass out on the street with money on top of you at 2 in the morning, and someone will probably just take the money to put it back in your pocket or something like that. Because I never had any trouble there at all. There's a bit of a partying on the streets kind of thing. They have a lot of booze in there. I don't drink too much anymore, but at the time I did my travels from 25 to 29. So there were definitely some parties along the way, definitely. Another cool one, do I have it here? The United Kingdom, Edinburgh. Yeah, I always like to mention Edinburgh. This is just Edinburgh Castle, nothing crazy. Here's the hills of Edinburgh. But me and my couch surfer kind of just walked around the city, and it felt like a dream or something like that. Like there was just nowhere to go that wasn't like, wow, what's going on here? This is cool. This is like old buildings, or just people having fun, people throwing frisbees in the park. It was just like nothing but happy people. I think it was during like the school break, so that might have also made it better, but it was still good. And that actually brings me to a point about like when people say, what's the best place to go? What do you recommend? What's your favorite place? It's anywhere I recommend, it's not going to be the same. I mean, first off, because it's been 10 years since I went there. But second off, even if it's a week later, or I would run into this often where people would tell me, oh, don't go there. That place sucks. And it's like, I'd be like, well, I just went there last week and it was great, you know? So you got to take everyone's recommendations with a grain of salt, and everybody's their own kind of traveler. So you never really know, and I think that's where, like, there are certain places where it's like, yeah, that's legit not that great, but for the most part, you can have a good time anywhere, really. And when people ask me where do you want to go, it's almost like I have to ask them, well, what do you want to see? What do you want to experience? What do you want to do? Because that's gonna be more accurate than saying, oh, you have to see this, you have to see that kind of thing. At least in my opinion. Other things I used to do when I was traveling, I got a bunch of tattoos along the way. I took pictures of them as well. These are some of the tattoos I got. I got like a mushroom on my foot, and some of them were more professional than others. This was the first tattoo I ever got. This compass, which is here on my arm. Hard to show there. It looks much more crisp there when I first got it. I got that in Russia. I got these birds in Japan. I got this quote in Malaysia. I got this like kiss tattoo in Colombia. The mushroom I got it. I also got that one in Colombia actually. This vesiger thing on my other foot. I got that in India. But these are just random opportunities you have. I mean, I also had some tattoo ideas, and I thought it was cool to get tattoos along the way. But you never know where things are gonna happen. Like this mushroom one. I mean, it's not the most professional or cleanly done, but it was just when I was doing like this thing called Workaway, where you can kind of work along the way. When I went from San Francisco to Colombia, I'd planned ahead of time that I would go to a small town called Amaga and teach English there a little bit. And I was able to get like accommodations for teaching English while I was there. And while I was there, the gardener had all these cool tattoos, and he was like, "Oh, I do tattoos. You should come to my house, and I'll give you a tattoo." So I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not? That sounds cool." And yeah, like again, you just have to. You never know when it's gonna happen, and assuming it's safe and it's within your bounds of like comfort, then that's where saying yes to things is a big help. I remember that movie, the Jim Carrey movie, Yes Man. That's legitimate, you know. Like you start saying yes to stuff, and stuff starts to work a little bit. But it's not magic. It's because you're different, your outlook's different, and you're putting yourself in these situations to have these opportunities. So that's another thing that I thought was pretty cool along the way. Um, I mean, that's the gist of it. I feel like I've explained a lot. Like, please check out my website to see more of these things, like the blog posts. You can see my pictures on there and just kind of some of the stories I've done, because I get into it. Where are my blog posts here? I get into it quite a bit in the blog posts, just all the different things I went through and a lot of details. Like here's when I was in India, and I actually have more pictures here than I have in some of my other things about little places I went along the way, and the details too, because people care about the details. So if you're going to a certain place, you can find a blog post in here where I went there and see how it was for you. But those are my main learnings from doing the travel, and that's kind of just like a quick summary. So I hope people leave some comments and questions in the down below in the video. And I want to do more videos and get into more details of some stuff. But I can go on forever about it. Like one of the reasons why I've been waiting 10 years to do this video is just like it can't be done in one video, especially in one go. But I've been telling these travel stories for so long that I felt it was time to do a video on it, and I hope you like this video. And if you want to, and just one other quick thing that's going on right now is there's this little vote for us thing. My website's actually nominated for Webby. And it's competing with a lot of other websites that are travel websites. So I wanted to kind of highlight the fact that I actually do have a lot of cool travel stuff on my website, but it's kind of hidden away because I've redone my website a few times, and it's no longer a simple WordPress blog. But feel free to vote for me if you like my travel stories, and please do check out my site just to see kind of all the stuff I've got on there. And yeah, that's it. So I hope you liked the video, and thanks, and see you in the next one. Bye.